Hi folks, Robert Lowell Goller here. Thank you for joining me in Hamlin Park for our weekly chats about local history. These are usually live streams, but I've been taking the show on the road, especially with the nice summer weather we've been having. And the reason I'm in Hamlin Park is I just had a great opportunity to talk about local history, the importance of history with the campers, the young campers of the J.P. Nicely Memorial West Falls Park up in West Falls and here at Hamlin Park. They invite me, the recreation department here in the town of Aurora invites me each year to have a little chat with the young folks. And I've been doing it probably for 6 years now. I think since COVID, we started it during COVID. We were outside and it was a great way to have an activity that was socially distanced, but we continue to do it. And one of the things we talk about, in addition to the history of Hamlin Park that they get to play in, and I'm going to talk about that in a bit in an upcoming video because I get a lot of questions and I've been working on the history of Hamlin Park, but also the history of the J.P. Nicely Park up in West Falls and why it's named after Mr. Nicely, who was, by the way, on the town board, the school board, and did a lot of great things for the community up there, so that's why they named it J.P. Nicely Park. We talked about that history. We also talked about the importance of history and why history is important to study. And if you think young people don't like history, or you may have this idea in your head that they hate social studies, you're wrong. That's definitely a myth. These young people were great, had so many great ideas, so many great questions, and I learned a lot from them as well, as I always do. We allotted an hour per session, and we went over every single time. We just had so many questions, and we had to cut it off, and then afterwards the kids were coming up asking me more questions. A group, the small group in each of the groups that was very interested in history came up to me afterwards to ask more questions. So young people are very interested in history, and if you don't think so, you just have to come to do a little program like I did in Hamlin Park or at the J.P. Nicely Park in West Falls to find that out. It's been wonderful. So in addition to talking about the importance of history, we did a little exercise and to demonstrate why history is important, not only studying the past, but studying the present, and studying the future, why it's important to the past, present, and future. Oftentimes history is considered something from the past only, but the whole reason we study history, as the young people told me, is that we don't want to make the same mistakes that people made in the past. We don't want to repeat the same mistakes. And also, in addition to that, we also want to repeat the good things that they did. Oftentimes we'll have something come up in local towns and villages, and people think it's the first time we've ever dealt with an issue or the first time someone's come up with an idea. And when you actually research into the past, you'll see an idea that worked in the past that might be worth repeating. So in addition to not wanting to repeat the mistakes, we also want to repeat the successes and maybe learn from the past in a positive way as well. So the kids at the summer camps had that down. They understood that. And so one of the exercises we did was to talk about what life was like when I was their age and what life will be like when they are my age in the future. So we averaged their ages out about 10 years old. And I said, 40 years ago, what was a life like? What did I not have as a 10-year-old that you have today as a 10-year-old? And then we had them tell me what they think, to try to predict the future, what they think they will have when they're my age that they don't have now, that we don't have now. Well, first, of course, many of the things that I didn't have or anybody around my age did not have when we were young. Some of them were simple. When we got beyond the idea in their head that I was raised during the horse and buggy age, once we got past that, some of them had thought that I was raised in the 1800s without automobiles. I'm not that old. But once we got beyond that and we actually talked about 1985 as the year, what didn't we have in 1985 that they have today? The list just started to roll. They understood that, we didn't have the video games that they had today, no iPads, no cell phones. The cell phones was a big deal. We were discussing that. Car safety. I remember when I was their age that the idea of a seatbelt became a law. That cars didn't even have seatbelts before I was young, before many of us were young. And actually in my lifetime, in our lifetime, in many of our lifetimes, the seatbelt became a law that we all have to wear, and it just becomes a regular routine thing. That wasn't the case when I was younger. Computers, I remember the old Apple IIe's with the dot matrix printers that came about when I was about their age. Cable television, the old idea when I was young, the 3 or 4 TV stations. I had said if we might get 5 on a good day if it wasn't too windy, because we had relied on antennas, and they were fascinated by all this. And when I was really young, we still had a black and white television. I remember the day. I don't remember how old I was, but I do remember that glorious day that we got the color television. And so we were talking about just how fast things move and how fast these inventions compound themselves. So one invention leads to another, and in a very short period of time, life changes quite a bit. The phone was another big deal. We had talked about, like, they were fascinating that they had heard from their grandmas and their parents that grandmas and grandpas and parents that they had to actually, stand at the phone to talk on the phone, and it was connected to the wall. Again, in the past even 20 years, that's changed. Which is hard to imagine. The smartphones that we have today, the computers in our pocket, that they're growing up with, and how much that has changed. So just sitting back, I think it was really important to sit back with young people and talk to them about those changes. Our life is moving just so quickly. And we often don't step back to, stop to smell the roses, if you will. Well, to stop to think about those things, how much things have changed, and the impact it's having on the young people and what they think about it. And the young people were concerned. The children I talked to during these summer camps were concerned, like adults are, that this change might not be good, and that sometimes they may have to step back a little bit, do things in moderation. So they get that. They're growing up with it, but I think they understand it. So the second part of our exercise was for them to tell me what they think the future holds for them. What will we have when they are my age that they don't have now? And it was interesting because I'm standing there along with a few other counselors who are close to my age, standing there that alive. We're still alive. We're hopefully look young to them, and to put in perspective that in 40 years they're going to be my age, which isn't hopefully not that old, and put in perspective that a lot of things can change between the time they're living now and where I'm at now. And it was very interesting to have that conversation. But 40 years from now, and I found it interesting, I'm just going to read through some of the lists of things that they had come up with. Flying cars, controlling gravity, jetpacks for everyone. Most of these ideas involve defying gravity. Most of the children think that we're going to not be on the ground for much longer, that we will be floating around. And we'll talk about that in a little bit of what the implications of that they think are. Time machines, being able to actually time travel. One of the things about the flying cars we talked about a bit, is in 40 years we're predicting flying cars, but in 1985 they were predicting on Back to the Future that in 2015, 30 years into the future, that we would have flying cars, and we didn't have them yet. But these young people still think we're going to have flying cars. Floating subways in cities, on sort of a Venice situation, but fast subways on water, so you don't have to rely on rails. Fewer or different animals. They think that we might have different animals come about and more animals go extinct. Real hoverboards, again defying gravity. That we will actually go to Mars, that humans will be able to go to Mars. Human-made animals that are created, cloned or created by humans, and we talked a little bit about the implications of that. That we will be able to dig down to the Earth's core, that we will somehow figure out a way that we won't burn up on the way down there. New fashions. They think clothing is going to be shinier in 2065. That things will be shinier, brighter, more colorful. And we talked a little bit about how fashion changes and repeats over time. People will be living in space. Again, sort of that defying gravity theme that a lot of these young people think we're going to have. Finding a way to breathe underwater. One of the things they were talking about is the climate change will create more flooding, and that in extreme cases, the water will overtake the land, and that we will have to develop a way as humans that we won't become extinct, but we will have developed a way to breathe underwater and live underwater, because we're not going to be able to beat it. So we'll kind of join the water. Immortality was one of them, and we talked a little bit about whether we would want to live forever. And steam-powered cars. Some people thought we would go back to like steam-powered locomotives, that we would use water for our cars. More indoor animals. Chickens could be indoors, where some people were saying. Automatic shoes that you just put on, and they know your size of your feet. So you just buy one standard shoe and it would conform to your foot size. That was someone's idea. Teleportation was another one. Hovering plates, that at restaurants the plates would somehow be able, again defying gravity, to hover in the air and be placed in front of you without a waitress having to bring, or a waiter server having to bring it to you. Outside plants in the winter. That was one of my favorite ones that they predicted for 2065, that we will not have to worry about taking our plants in, because all the plants will be developed in a way that we will be able to leave them outside for the winter, which I thought was interesting. So those were the things that some of the people were the kids were coming up with to discuss the future and what will be like in 2065. So I thought that was quite interesting. One of the reasons we talked about this was, and how we can learn from the past, is one of the things about flying cars and us floating with jetpacks and things like that. We were concerned that that people flying around in the sky would run into each other, that there would have to be some sort of infrastructure system to make sure that we didn't run into each other, that there wasn't a problem with that in the air. And that's what led to a discussion about a few weeks ago. I had talked about stop signs and the need for stop signs. And so we discussed how we can learn from history that the same thing could happen in the sky if we have floating cars in the future. The same thing could happen up there that happened us 100 years ago on the ground. And back 100 years ago, 1920s, as I had discussed before, more and more people were getting automobiles. So that led to a domino effect of needing to pave roads, to brick roads, to concrete roads, and the need for stop signs, because the more cars that were on the road, the more people came to intersections, and they actually, the stop sign came out of that popularity of automobiles that had never been there before. And so we discussed how that same thing could happen in the future in the sky, where we would need stop signs floating around in the air to control how we navigate the sky. And there would have to be some sort of system to do that. And so we discussed how not everything, that's invented is either a good thing, or one thing leads to another. So cars led to stop signs, led to paved roads, and so the same thing will happen in the sky. And how we might, we talked about ways we can prepare, knowing what we know from the past, knowing what we know about why stop signs were needed. What can we do to prepare for flying cars? So learning about the past and what we went through in the past with stop signs and things like that, in order to prepare for what might be coming to us in the year 2065 when they're around 50 years old. I thought that was interesting. So I learned quite a bit, and I do encourage you, when we often talk about history, we talk about talking to older people, to senior citizens, to record what they went through. I also think it's important to talk to young people about what they think the future will hold, and their perceptions about what the past was like. It was interesting to hear their perspective on it. So yes, interview your grandmas and grandpas and great grandmas and grandpas, and talk to people who have lived life, but and lived through the past. But also don't forget to talk to young people, because they have a really, really great perspective. So I did this as part of my role as town historian. Met with the campers here at Hamlin Park and at JP Nicely Park. And so what I'm going to do is, we made a list, and I'm going to take this list and we're going to put it in the town archives with a note that tells them to open it in 2065. And I think it'll be interesting to see for the people in 2065, perhaps some of the children who are participating here, to open it sort of as a time capsule to see if any of those predictions come true. And to see, I think they'll get a kick out of seeing what people were thinking, what 10-year-olds were thinking back here in 2025. I think that would be quite interesting and quite interesting exercise. It also might be an interesting exercise for all of us. Sit down and write. I'm big on journaling, but sit down and write what you think the future will hold. And it might be enlightening in the future to look back on it to see what we were thinking here in 2025. Again, thank you for joining me here in Hamlin Park for our weekly chat about local history. I am Robert Lowell Goller, and I am the town and village historian. But these videos and a lot of my research are not officially connected to my duties as town and village historian. As always, thank you for joining me. All these videos are also available on YouTube. Just go to Robert Lowell Goller. Facebook is starting to delete videos, but the YouTube channel has them all if you want to look up a specific topic. Thanks for the feedback. Thanks for the ideas. Of course, just pop them in the comment section or send me a private message as you always do. And until next time, thank you for keeping history alive and take care. We'll see you soon.